Hello. Psycho, 8-song EP. Have you heard this record? Do you know this record? Do you want to talk about this record? Well, I'll talk about this record. When people think of Boston hardcore in the 80s, they think of bands like SSD, DYS, Jerry's Kids, The FUs, Gangrene, Slapshot. And while these bands were all obviously integral to the scene here, there was also a number of bands sort of doing their own thing on the fringes that were working hard. And, probably the biggest one of those who would, become highly influential to a lot of, metal-tinged bands, at least, albeit later, was Siege, who, pretty much blew anyone off the stage that you saw them with, except maybe Jerry's Kids, that kind of thing. And they were young kids from Weymouth, Mass., which is south of Boston. It should be noted that, most of the bands that, were called Boston hardcore bands, I don't think any of them were from Boston proper, which is fine. SSD and DYS had guys from the North Shore, and, Jerry's Kids and Gangrene had members from south of Boston. And, that's neither here nor there. But, there was other bands sort of on the fringes, like I said. Cancerous Growth, Western Mass band, The Outpatients, who, I don't think anyone would ever call them a Boston hardcore band, but, they played up here enough that, they were sort of a Boston band by proxy, And then there was Psycho, formed in 1981. And yeah, so Psycho is the longest running Boston hardcore band. Of course, Slapshot still plays. The FUs are playing shows again. The Freeze, Jerry's Kids, every once in a while will play a show. But, all those bands have had long hiatuses. And Psycho, at least with founding member Johnny X, has been playing since 1981. And this, lineup on this record that we're going to talk about would change. Most notably, Charlie Infection would become the drummer. And, and that was around 1984. This record came out in 1983. And Charlie and Johnny have been the two constants in this band since 1984, which is pretty fucking crazy. That's 41 years, right? Or something like that. And the lineups they've had have all been great and, suited the sound of the band at the time. And, they've gone everywhere from, just sort of traditional straight up punk rock. This record starts, opens with a pretty solid cover of the song Psycho by the Sonics from the 60s. To, blistering discharge style hardcore, to grindcore, to thrash, and everything in between. And the main constant, I think keeping this band together this long is, I would imagine, is just how humble and down to earth and cool these two guys are. I've known, Charlie and Johnny since I was 14 years old. And, I don't know how old they are at this point, but I remember at the time thinking they were, significantly like old guys. They were probably in their 20s, but to me, when you're 14, you think everyone's 50, But that's beside the point. The point of that is, I was a 14-year-old kid, and, these guys never made you feel like a kid. You were just a hardcore kid like them. And, of course, these guys were just like always happy to see you, Johnny and Charlie, even up until, I'm saying this now, I haven't seen them since the early 2000s, but what I'm saying though is, when you're a real band and you just kind of do what you want and you're, down to earth and humble like that, you're going to thrive. And, and these guys have a reputation for just being a solid group of guys. They never fell into any sort of clique or scene. I used to joke that the reason Psycho wasn't part of like the Boston crew or the Boston hardcore scene was, Last Rites had that song where it was like, Coca-Cola, we don't drink no booze, which is a fucking awesome song, obviously. And Steve Verstein from Slapshot used to wear those Coca-Cola shirts all the time, so I imagine he was a Coca-Cola guy. I think he had a Coca-Cola tattoo. Or am I thinking of Brian Baker? And if you know Charlie Infection, he's a Pepsi guy, like a hardcore Pepsi Cola guy. If I'm thinking correct that he's a memorabilia guy, like collector too. In the 90s, I went to his house a few times and to hang out, and yeah, I think I remember there was some Pepsi memorabilia there. So yeah, maybe the Cola Wars spilled over into the hardcore scene. If you were a Coke guy or a Pepsi guy, you were gonna butt heads. And I even jokingly brought that up to a unnamed member of the band Slapshot, and they didn't seem that amused by it. What are you gonna do? Some people are very serious about stuff like hardcore. What are you gonna do? Anyway, Charlie was also playing in a band called Cancerous Growth. And also another group of like the nicest guys in the world. Bass player Mark Tobio, just a sweetheart of a guy. He sadly passed away a few years ago. And, you'd see him up front at, every show. Local bands, big bands, and just like a good dude. Always happy to see you. Maybe 20 years ago, I ran into the guitar player, John Malignant, who, it's not his real last name, FYI. Also just like a really nice guy. It was always nice to like catch up with those guys. And then at once Charlie joined, once Charlie joined the band, I believe he helped start running Action Records with Johnny, and they put out, all the Psycho and Cancerous Growth stuff, and then they put out compilations. They even did like a split with I Hate God years later, and I think they did a version of the Freeze's Guilty Face 7-inch at one point, maybe in the 90s. At one point in the late 90s, I worked at a record store in Billerica, Mass., which was near kind of where Charlie Infection lived at the time. I believe he still lives up that way. And called Slip Disc Records. And we had a pretty, it was another one of these stores like Rocket Records, where I'm hoping to talk about this store at some point on here, as it was another one of the stores that was sort of integral to getting metal and more underground heavy music out to people in Massachusetts, along with Rocket Records, where I worked before this. But they started selling a lot of black metal, and so that was a big thing there. You get a lot of imports. But Charlie, Ken McKay, who was a singer for Ichabod and Oxblood Forge, worked there alongside me, and Jonah Jenkins from Only Living Witness worked there before I did. But Charlie would come in there from time to time, and he was selling stuff that he had released on Action Records, and then he had a side project called Gonkulator, which was sort of this sort of noisy black metal grind thing that was pretty intense. And if you can find that stuff online, there's some videos and stuff you can see. It's pretty funny. I used to say, I can gonk you now, or I can gonk you later. It's up to you. Sorry. So let's talk about this record before I start making more terrible dad jokes. So this record, like I said, this is I bought this. I didn't buy this when it came out. This came out in 1983, sort of right before I came along and started going to shows and buying records. But I bought it around the same time. And, this is the same one I bought, probably in 1985 or something. I don't even remember when I bought this. Or maybe I stole it from someone. I'm not sure. Anyway, I have it, and it's in great condition. The music on this record. So, for a debut record, this is pretty badass. The first song is a cover, like I said, it's a pretty straightforward version of Psycho by the Sonics, which is kind of what you want. You don't want that song you don't want to fuck with a song like that, or jam it out or make it funk or something. And that's immediately followed by this ultra fast song, Destruction. This 1-minute blast of hardcore. That's of its time. The more mid-tempo follow-up Dark Side of the Human Mind, which kind of sounds like Fear to me, at least Johnny's guitar playing in it. But that's a cool song. It's a little slower. And then the next song is The Elimination Process, which is essentially Pay to Come by the Bad Brains. So it's a very similar riff with a different chorus, which, the chorus kind of sets it apart from the Bad Brains song. Listen for yourself. The next two songs on this record, which open side two, are my favorites. The first song being Contempt, which is this rapid fire blast of, Discharge-esque hardcore that, flies by in under, just about a minute, I think. And then Kids Are for Tricks is a mix of hardcore with like this sort of Wire influence, just like the rhythms of it. So score one for Psycho who understood how to do Wire better than Minor Threat did. Yeah, I said that. Follow-up song, Paper, also follows, the hardcore playbook, but there's also some of that Wire-esque rhythm in there, too, taking place. And that's sort of the last time I kind of heard that on a Psycho record. And then the next song is, another similar one, but both of these, the last two songs are under a minute. And, after hearing this record for the first time at the time, you weren't sure what to expect from this band after this, because it was kind of all over the place, but it has a sound. In this lineup, Bill Normal was in the band for the bass player for a while. Mick, I think, left pretty soon after this, and they had a guy named Mega, and that's who sang on the follow-up to this, I'm pretty sure. He's the one that was in the band when I interviewed them for the fanzine. But yeah, so I listen to this record all the time. It's still, this copy of it is in great shape, and so I play it all the time. And because it brings me back to this era of 1983, 84, where just discovering all these bands and finding out that you can approach bands and talk to them, and they're not going to treat you like, you're some sort of like fanboy or something. You're just like you do the same as them. So it was cool for, introverted youngsters like myself. And with that, that's a perfect segue from the word youngster to this song, The Kids Are for Tricks, which is a song I was just talking about on this record. Enjoy, and thanks for watching.
Watch it, tell you that a dream. You won't have to push it up. nice day.